Good evening and welcome to Future Forward. Tonight we delve into a question that sits at the very heart of our society's ambitions for the next generation. In an era of rapid economic change and technological disruption, what is the fundamental purpose of a university education? Is it a direct pipeline to a job? A finely tuned machine for workforce preparation? Or is it something more profound, more foundational? The central debate we're exploring is this. Should universities be solely responsible for preparing students for the workforce? To help us navigate this complex issue, we have two distinguished guests. First, Ms. Chloe Dubois, the CEO of a leading technology firm, who's on the front lines of hiring and understands the demands of the modern workplace intimately. And joining her is Dr. Samuel Reed, a celebrated professor of humanities, who champions the university's traditional role in fostering broad intellectual and critical development. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I look forward to the discussion.
We'll begin with opening statements from each of our guests, followed by a moderated discussion. Ms. Dubois, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to begin by stating my immense respect for our academic institutions. They are pillars of knowledge and have been for centuries. However, it's crucial that we have a conversation grounded in the reality of the 21st century economy. The question is whether universities should be solely responsible for job preparation, and my answer is an emphatic no. They cannot be. And frankly, they should not be. The modern economy moves at a pace that institutional curricula simply cannot match. In my role, I interview dozens of graduates every year. These are brilliant young people, full of theoretical knowledge and intellectual curiosity. But there's a consistent and worrying disconnect between their academic achievements and their readiness for the workplace. This is what we call the, quote, skills gap. We see graduates who can write a fantastic essay on economic theory, but have never been exposed to the project management software that every modern business uses. They can discuss abstract concepts of communication, but struggle to draft a clear, concise email to a client, or collaborate effectively in a team-based digital environment. This means companies like mine have to invest significant time and resources, sometimes up to a year, in training new hires on practical, applicable skills that could have been integrated into their education. This isn't just a burden on businesses. It slows down innovation and delays the graduate's ability to make a meaningful contribution. Furthermore, consider the pace of change. By the time a university department proposes, develops, gets approval for, and implements a new course on a specific technology or business methodology, the industry has often moved on to the next iteration. This creates a permanent, unavoidable lag. Therefore, I advocate for a shared ecosystem of responsibility. Universities must continue to provide the essential foundation of critical thinking and deep knowledge. But this must be interwoven with practical experience. This means robust, mandatory internship programs, co-op models where students alternate between semesters of study and work, and curricula that are actively shaped by industry advisory boards. The responsibility also lies with the student to be proactive, and with the industry to create these opportunities. To place the entire burden on the university is to set them up for failure, and to disadvantage the very students they aim to serve.
Thank you, Ms. Dubois, for that clear perspective. Dr. Reed, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, David. I appreciate Ms. Dubois' perspective, which is entirely valid from a corporate standpoint. However, I believe it represents a dangerously short-sighted view of what education is and what it is for. The fundamental purpose of a university is not to train an employee for their first job. It is to educate a person for their entire life, which will likely include multiple jobs and even multiple careers, many of which we cannot yet imagine. Ms. Dubois speaks of a skills gap. I would argue the more dangerous gap is a thinking gap. The specific vocational skills she mentions, proficiency in a particular software, for example, have an incredibly short shelf life. The project management tool that is essential today will be obsolete in 5 years. The coding language in demand this year may be a footnote in a decade. In contrast, the skills cultivated in a true, deep education are timeless. The ability to analyze complex, unstructured problems, to construct a persuasive argument, to write with clarity and grace, to understand historical and cultural context, to adapt to new information and challenge one's own assumptions. These are the abilities that create leaders, innovators, and resilient citizens. A graduate who has spent 4 years wrestling with Plato, Shakespeare, and advanced theoretical physics is not, quote, unprepared. They are, in fact, supremely prepared to learn anything that is thrown at them, including a new piece of software. They have learned how to learn, which is the most valuable skill of all. If we allow universities to cater too closely to the immediate and often fluctuating demands of the market, we risk turning them into expensive vocational schools. We would be stripping them of their vital role as centers of pure research, of independent and sometimes critical thought, and as custodians of our cultural heritage. This would be a profound loss for society as a whole. So, in my view, a university that provides a rigorous, holistic, and intellectually demanding education is providing the best possible job preparation. It's a preparation for a 40-year career, not just the first 40 days. It is simply not measured by the narrow, checklist-style job descriptions that many employers seem to favor today.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Two very clear, yet opposing viewpoints. Let's get into the discussion. Dr. Reed, I'd like to start with you. You speak of timeless skills and a 40-year career, but students and their families are investing enormous sums of money, often taking on significant debt. Isn't it fair for them to expect a more immediate, tangible return on that investment in the form of a job shortly after graduation? How does a recent graduate, armed with a degree in philosophy or history, convince an employer of their value when their CV is being scanned by an algorithm looking for keywords like data analytics or agile methodology that Ms. Dubois mentioned?
That is an excellent and fair question. The concept of return on investment is key. I would argue we need to define that return more broadly. The return is not just the starting salary of the first job, but the graduate's entire earnings trajectory, and more importantly, their intellectual and personal fulfillment over a lifetime. Studies consistently show that while graduates from more technical or business-oriented programs might have a higher starting salary, humanities and social science graduates often catch up and even surpass them in earnings by mid-career. Why? Because they have been trained in leadership, communication, and complex problem-solving, the very skills needed for senior management roles. As for the algorithm, that is a failure of the hiring process, not of the education. It is the employer's responsibility to look beyond simplistic keywords. A student of philosophy is trained in logic and ethics, which are the foundations of system design and AI alignment. A history major excels at synthesizing vast amounts of information and understanding cause and effect. The failure is in not recognizing that these foundational skills are directly transferable.
Ms. Dubois, let me turn that to you. Dr. Reed suggests the problem lies with employers who use narrow keyword-based screening, not with the graduates. He also raises the concern that if curricula are designed with too much corporate input, universities risk becoming mere vocational schools, which could stifle the very creativity that leads to long-term innovation. What is your response?
I want to be very clear. I am not arguing for the elimination of the humanities or theoretical sciences. Dr. Reed's defense of these disciplines is powerful, and I agree with much of it. A world full of technicians without a grounding in ethics or history would be a bleak place indeed. This is not an either/or proposition. I am advocating for what many in business call the T-shaped professional. The vertical bar of the T represents the deep expertise in a specific field which a university major provides. But the horizontal bar represents the cross-disciplinary knowledge, the collaborative skills, and the ability to communicate with people from different fields. This horizontal bar is what is currently underdeveloped. Integrating practical experience doesn't stifle creativity, it fuels it. Some of the most innovative ideas in my company have come from interns who applied a fresh academic perspective to a real-world problem they had never encountered before. It was the collision of theory and practice that created the spark. They need exposure to both. So this isn't about turning universities into factories for our companies. It's about creating a two-way street. We can provide the real-world laboratories for their students, and they can provide the intellectual framework that gives that work meaning and context.
If I may, the T-shaped model is appealing, but who defines the shape of that T? My concern is that the horizontal bar, as you call it, will be dictated entirely by the current needs of the corporate world. Education in teamwork and collaboration will become training in the specific, collaborative software a company prefers. That's the slippery slope I'm talking about.
With respect, Dr. Reed, I believe that underestimates the integrity and intelligence of our educators. An advisory board is for advising, not dictating. It's about creating a dialogue so that a professor of computer science, for instance, understands that while theory is crucial, it's also beneficial for their students to learn about version control and agile development, because it's the language of the professional world they are about to enter. It makes their theoretical knowledge more potent, not less.
This has been a fascinating exchange. We are nearing the end of our time, so I'd like to move to closing statements. Ms. Dubois, you have the final word first.
Thank you. This debate has never been about asterisk if Nosh universities should prepare students for the world of work. Of course, they should. The real question is how they do it in a world that is fundamentally different from that of 20 or 30 years ago. The model where a university acts as a sole, isolated provider of knowledge is outdated and, I believe, a disservice to students who face immense pressure to succeed. We must move towards a model of shared responsibility, where academia, industry, and students themselves work in partnership. Let's build bridges between the campus and the corporation, not walls. A student's success in finding a fulfilling career depends on this collaboration. And frankly, so does the future of our economic competitiveness and innovation. It is a future I am optimistic about, if we choose to build it together.
Thank you, Ms. Dubois. Dr. Reed, your closing statement.
This discussion ultimately is about the very soul of higher education. Are we in the business of short-term training or long-term education? I maintain that the most valuable and practical preparation a university can offer is a rigorous intellectual journey. It is this journey that forges the adaptable, critical mind capable of navigating not just one job, but a lifetime of change. To trade this profound, transformative experience for a narrow set of fleeting vocational skills would be a historic mistake. We must be careful not to sacrifice the enduring value of a true education on the altar of short-term corporate needs. Let us continue to focus on preparing thoughtful, knowledgeable citizens, not just competent employees. The latter will naturally and inevitably follow from the former.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you, Ms. Dubois, for your insightful and passionate perspectives. We have heard a pragmatic call for integration and partnership from Ms. Dubois, countered by Dr. Reed's passionate defense of intellectual tradition as the ultimate form of preparation. As we look ahead, the challenge clearly remains: how do we best equip the next generation for a future that is still unwritten? Thank you for joining us on Future Forward. Good evening.